Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Photographic Life and the second episode of the Proust Questionnaire, which is a set of questions originally answered by the French writer Marcel Proust. Proust answered the questionnaire in a confession album, a form of parlour game popular at the end of the 1890s. The album, titled An Album to Record Thoughts, Feelings, etc., belonged to his friend Antoinette, the daughter of future French President Félix Ferrer. The album was found in 1924 by Ferrer's son and published in the French literary journal Les Cahiers du Mois. Our Proust Photo Quiz is an adaptation of the original text. This month's photographer who has agreed to attempt it? Well, it's photographer Pete Souza, who's a native of South Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and a best-selling author, speaker, and freelance photographer, who received his master's degree in journalism and mass communication from a university in Kansas and graduated cum laude with a Bachelor of Science degree in public communication from Boston University. He started his career working for two small newspapers in Kansas. From there, he worked as a staff photographer for the Chicago Sun-Times, an official photographer for President Reagan, a freelancer for National Geographic and other publications. He was the national photographer for the Chicago Tribune based in their Washington, D.C. bureau, and an assistant professor of photojournalism at Ohio University. While at the Tribune, Souza was part of the staff awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 2001. After 9/11, he was among the first journalists to cover the fall of Kabul, Afghanistan, after crossing the Hindu Kush Mountains by horseback in 3 feet of snow. In 1992, Souza produced and published Unguarded Moments, behind-the-scenes photographs of President Reagan, based on his 5.5 years in the Reagan White House. Souza was also the official photographer for the 2004 funeral of President Reagan. His 2008 book, The Rise of Barack Obama, includes exclusive photographs of Obama's rise to power. For all 8 years of the Obama administration, Souza was the chief official, White House photographer and the director of the White House Photo Office. His book, Obama, An Intimate Portrait, was published in 2017. His book, In a Shade, A Tale of Two Presidents, was published in 2018 and is a portrait in presidential contrasts, telling the tale of the Obama and Trump administrations through a series of visual juxtapositions. It is one of the best-selling photography books of all time, and in 2021, Souza was inducted into the International Photography Hall of Fame. In 2022, he was honoured with the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Professional Photographers of America. Based on his best-selling books, Souza became the subject of a documentary film in November 2020, The Way I See It, directed by Dawn Porter and produced by Porter, Laura Dern, Evan Hayes and Jamie Lemons. The film was nominated for an Emmy and became the highest-rated non-news live programme ever. Souza's most recent photography book, The West Wing and Beyond, What I Saw Inside the Presidency, was published in 2022. He has won numerous photojournalism awards and had solo exhibits of his photographs at numerous galleries. He currently has 2 travelling exhibits, Obama, An Intimate Portrait, and 2 presidents, Obama and Reagan. He is also Professor Emeritus of Visual Communication at Ohio University. And this week, he takes on our quiz. Okay, Pete, so welcome to the Photographic Life podcast. And thank you for agreeing to take part in the Proust Questionnaire.
I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I really appreciate you having on, and I hope you have some fun with this. My first question is, maybe this is an obvious question or an obvious answer, but which living person do you most admire?
There are so many. I think the obvious answer is Barack Obama.
And is that the one you're going to go with?
Yes.
I think it's as good an appropriate an answer. Okay. So, what is your greatest fear?
I would say, other than death, I would say missing a photograph, like missing a picture.
And how often do you think that happens?
Fortunately, now that I'm not um, that active in photography, not that often, but that was always a big fear. Um, when I was working full time, both as a White House photographer and as a photojournalist for newspapers and magazines.
And what is the trait that you most deplore in others?
I think probably dishonesty.
And what is the trait that you most deplore in yourself?
Occasionally, I think I'm reactive to a fault at times.
Reactive in what way?
Reactive in that if I tend to take things in the wrong way too often.
Okay. So, what is your greatest extravagance?
Greatest extravagance. That's a good one. I guess I guess having someone else shovel the snow for me.
Well, that's definitely an extravagance. Do they also sweep the leaves or do they only do the snow?
Yeah, no, they do the leaves as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
so are we talking about a gardener here or just an odd job kind of a guy?
Yeah, an odd job, contractor. Just you get to a certain age and you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. So
Yeah.
you hire somebody to do it.
There's only so many leaves you can sweep in a life.
There you go. Not that I don't do any, because I do a few here and there, but for the bulk of it, I have somebody else do it.
Okay, so that maybe leads us on quite nicely. What do you consider is the most overrated virtue?
Boy, that's a tough one. Overrated virtue. I guess money, you know.
Well, you've certainly been around enough of that.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you're going to stick with money.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, this might be a little bit easier. Which words or phrases do you use most, or do you most overuse?
Just in listening to myself after a podcast like this, I am frustrated that I use too often, or the other one is I often use I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, it makes complete sense, but you haven't used it so far.
No, no, no. That latter one. I don't know if that makes any
Oh,
sense.
okay. Well, okay, so that makes sense that that's one of the ones you use most often.
Yeah. So I have those two.
They're
I don't
your
know if that makes any sense. And
okay. And
so annoying that I do that, but I
is
do.
that what other people would say about you as well?
I have no idea what other people would say about
Okay. Well, maybe we'll discover as we'll go through the questions. Which talent would you most like to have?
I would like to be a better guitar player. I mean, I started guitar lessons when I was, I don't know, 6 or 7. My dad was a very proficient guitar player. And, here it is going on, I don't know how many years, 60 plus years, and I still am not that good.
You'd be amazed how many of the people who've taken this quiz say the same thing. How many photographers want to be better musicians?
Yeah.
There's definitely something there, I think. So, what kind of guitarist would you like to be? Who would be your hero?
Um, well, I think for me, the guitar player that I enjoy. Well, my dad grew up introducing me to Chet Atkins, And I think somewhere when I was 13 or 14, I latched on to Carlos Santana, who was just like an amazing guitar player. I always have thought that he's one of the best. And he's on this website called Masterclass, and I listened to some of his class, which is really he's a really interesting guy, as it turns out, as well as a great guitar player.
Have you ever met him?
I've never met him, no.
Okay, he never wandered through the White House at any point.
No, interestingly, no. I mean, we had all sorts of musicians come through the White House, and I'm not sure why, you know, Santana was, never one of them. I mean, it was like Springsteen came and John Fogerty from CCR and Mick Jagger and B.B. King and Buddy Guy, and I could go on and on.
Yeah, and Bob Dylan as well.
Bob Dylan, Prince. So I'm not sure of the circumstances why. It's possible. Like I'm trying to remember. It's possible Santana performed at one of the Kennedy Center honors, but I don't believe he ever came to the White House when I was there.
Okay. I'm very tempted to ask you about Bob Dylan because I'm a huge fan, but we must continue with the quiz. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
I think being being present for my two granddaughters.
Well, that's really lovely. I mean, again, family is always a constant when I ask these questions. If you were to die and come back as a person or a thing, what would it be?
I think I'd come back as a music producer.
Okay, and who are you going to produce? Don't tell me Carlos Santana.
I guess I'd want to produce an unknown artist and that rockets to stardom.
So not too ambitious then.
I could get in on the ground level with up and coming artist.
So this is like a John Hammond with Bob Dylan or with Springsteen.
Yeah, something like that.
That would do. Okay. Where would you most like to live?
And my wife and I recently moved to be close to our granddaughters. I would say wherever they are. I think place doesn't matter as much as proximity to them. Maybe that'll change in a few years when they become teenagers, but for now, just close to them.
Do you have a leaning towards an urban or a rural lifestyle, or does it not matter to you?
I think there's advantages to both. I've lived in Chicago. I've lived in Boston. Two major cities. I lived in Washington. I lived in outside of DC, but for the bulk of my life, I guess more than half of my life, I lived there. And there's things about that I really miss. But now I live in a small town, fairly small town, which is where I grew up in a small town. And there's advantages to that as well. One of the biggest advantages is there's no traffic. Like, and I am a frustrated driver in cities like DC and Boston and Chicago.
And do you have a sense of anonymity within a small town? Or do they all know who you are?
I've tried to maintain anonymity as best I can in where I live now. So for the most part, I've been able to do that. Now, I lived for a few years in Madison, Wisconsin, and there it was hard to maintain anonymity more, I think.
Is anonymity something that you cherish, that you enjoy?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
as a photographer doing the kind of work you were doing, it's very much about not being seen, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, I put a label on it. You've heard this term, being a fly on the wall. It is a way of sort of blending in and being able to capture candid moments. But I'm not a fly and I'm not stuck on the wall. So I came up with this term that I always tried to be invisibly present in these situations.
That's nice. What's your most treasured possession?
Well, some of the little notes that I've gotten from one of my granddaughters, and then I think in a more, in terms of career, I don't know if you can see it in the background there, but on Air Force One, when it was time for lunch, they would bring our lunch to us on these cafeteria style trays, and it had like the symbol of Air Force One and the presidential seal on it. And then when you finished your lunch, they'd come and take the tray away. So one day they served me my lunch. And when I was done, they didn't take the tray away. They just took the plate away. And I was like, you forgot the tray. And then I looked down at the tray and it was the normal tray, except it was specially made and that said, congratulations on your 1,000th flight
Wow.
aboard Air Force One. So that's like such a cool memento from, my time working at the White House.
Such a thoughtful thing as well.
Yes.
Okay, that's a pretty impressive treasured possession. What is your most marked characteristic?
Most marked. Probably stubbornness.
A good quality in a photographer.
At times, yes.
A good and bad quality.
Yes.
Did it ever get you into trouble?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that or not?
Oh, there are so many times. I mean, the one that probably comes to mind is this is when I was working for a small newspaper in Kansas, and a factory started on fire, big fire. The town's fire department went to the scene. I heard about it maybe on a police scanner, I guess, and drove out there. The factory was on private property, but the public fire department was there, so I thought I had to be the right to be there. And the owner of the factory was telling me to get off his property and that he didn't want me to take any photographs. And I was like, no, I have a right to be here, And he persisted. I persisted, and he finally punched me in the face, which I got a photo of with a lens of him actually punching me. And of course, he made the mistake of doing this right in front of because the police were on the scene, right in front of a police officer. So he was immediately arrested. But so that was stubborn to like, no, I have a right to be here, and you can't tell me to leave.
What do you most value in your friends?
I would say time. Just being able to spend time.
So, which historical figure do you most identify with?
I think in some ways Yoshio Okamoto, who was LBJ's official White House photographer. I mean, I think he was the one who set the bar on documenting for history, presidency. And he had an exhibit. He's passed many years ago. I think he died in the mid 80s. but he had an exhibit. There was an exhibit of his work in DC a while back, and it included not just like the greatest hits, but it had like multiple images from, you know, one day, you know, how he had covered an event. And I remember like I could imagine the thought process as I looked at these photographs, which was very similar, I think, probably to the way I thought. So I was like, that was a revelation that, you know, just trying to put myself in his shoes and the way he saw things. And I just really wish I had had a chance to meet him. You know, I just admire him so much.
What did he do that was so different?
I mean, I think he elevated the idea of access and of being there when shit was going down, in a way that had been not done before. I mean, if you go, you know, just even to the previous administration, the Kennedy administration, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis for 10 days in the early 60s. And there's really no photographs of that, because the White House photographer, it was a military photographer then, was just not allowed that kind of access until like the crisis was ending. You know, there's some photographs, I think, on the last day. And I think Okamoto was like, no, I'm going to be there for everything. And, you know, and he had a willing, Johnson wanted that, you know. So I think he just really set the bar, in such a way that his predecessors, including me, just tried to live up to the bar that he set.
So, in a sense, do you think it was important for him to have that kind of relationship with Johnson that you had then with Obama?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly the relationship he had with Johnson. I mean, it's interesting. The LBJ library has some interest. Like if there was if I had if I wanted to, you know, ask President Obama about something, or on the rare occasion where I might say, hey, would you mind, you know, signing this for my daughter or something like that? I mean, very rare. I would just ask him. And the LBJ library has requests like that from Okamoto, that he typed out a note to Johnson. You know, sir, would you mind signing this baseball for, you know, my friend or whatever, which I found really fascinating. You know, that's the approach that he took. I mean, I think our relationship was similar. I mean, I've heard Okamoto say, or I don't know if it was a recording or somewhere I heard somebody talk about that he would barely say hi to Johnson every day. You know, his job, as was mine, was to be an observer and not a participant. So it's not like, you know, I was having these long conversations with Barack Obama every day. I wasn't. I mean, most of the days I just like, yeah, good morning. And, you know, maybe we might chat at some point about, you know, he's a sports fan, I'm a sports fan, about, you know, the big game last night or something like that. But for the most part, you know, we were there as observers, not participants.
I think it's a very key thing, isn't it, for the photographer to understand that you're not a participant, and that
Yeah.
crossing that line can sometimes cause issues.
Yeah, and as he writes in his book, President Obama writes in his book about, you know, there's a little paragraph about me, and he talks about, you know, always being there for both his successes and his failures. You know, which is true. I mean, if you're going to document for history, you can't just be there when good stuff's going on. You got to be there when everything's going on.
Which leads us maybe onto my next question. What is your greatest regret?
In life or in photography or
It's up to you to interpret it however you wish. You may answer the questions in your own way.
I don't know if I have a single great regret. I think generally I regret times that I lost my temper, said things that I wish I hadn't. And I can't even think of a specific example, but so it's hard to say this one thing. It's just I think just generally, I not often, but occasionally get triggered, say things that I probably shouldn't have.
Okay, so moving on to a slightly, perhaps more positive question. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
I think perfect happiness is good times with family. I mean, we just had Thanksgiving here in the U.S. and it's always a gathering, either with family or with family and friends. I've done both depending on where we are at the time and who's in close proximity. So I think just that's happiness to me, I think.
And what is your motto?
What is my motto?
Yeah, what is your motto? What is your creed? What is that thing that you live by?
Well, I think for the longest time, it was today I'm going to make the best photograph I've ever made. Or tomorrow I'm going to make the best photograph, I'm ever going to make. It's sort of always trying to I don't know if it's outdo myself, but the possibility that today may yield a great photograph. Now it's a little different now because I'm kind of more or less retired, so I don't do active photography every day. I mean, I still do a lot of photography. So I guess I have to come up with a new motto, which I guess would be tomorrow's another day.
Which is as positive a way of looking at it as I'm going to make a good picture next time.
Yeah.
That's my last question, Pete. I hope you enjoyed answering them.
It was very interesting and challenging at times. I think when you first reached out to me, I kind of looked up what this was all about, and then I forgot about it.
Which is always the best way.
Yeah, because I didn't know what questions were going to be coming my way.
Well, that's the whole point of what we do. I think that we can be sure that you are a potential record producer who wants to be a better guitarist, who occasionally loses their temper, but also a family man. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
All right, Pete. Thanks so much for taking the quiz.
You bet. Thank you.
And thank you for listening. I hope you're really enjoying this way of getting under the skin of photographers. I think as the archive grows, we're going to see themes developing, as we always do. Dreams, themes, and schemes. Anyway, that's it for this week. Big thanks to Pete once again. Another thank you to you for listening. And of course, take care.